So today we're going to be working on lesson 1-4, which is all about perimeter and area. So first, before we talk about perimeter and area, we're going to talk about polygons. Now, you may recognize some of the information from today, may not, and that's okay. Okay, so a polygon is a closed figure with 3 or more sides intersecting at a vertex. When naming a polygon, you should list the vertices, which is just the plural version of vertex. Okay, so versus vertexes, it's vertices. Okay, in consecutive order. Okay, so a polygon is a closed figure with 3 or more sides intersecting at a vertex. When naming a polygon, you should list the vertices in consecutive order. So I'm just going to draw a random polygon. We can talk about it. Doesn't have to be perfect. All right, so on this image, what would be considered a side? On this image, what would be considered a side? Yep. Yeah, that would be perfectly fine. This would be considered a side. Okay, A to F, A, B, B, C, C, D, D, E, E, F. All of these are the sides of our polygon. So like you said, you could say sine AF as a segment. So you have little segments making up your polygon. Okay, what is a vertex? What do we think the vertex is? They're the corner points. Good. Okay. So the vertex is where the side intersect and meet. So all your corners are your vertices. Okay. Now, if just because we're being general, we'll talk about names of polygons, but if we were just being general, I could say this is called polygon A, B, C, D, E, F. Okay. But we'll talk about the names of some special polygons here in a second. But if it just asked for a general situation, you could say just say polygon A, B, C, D. Okay. You don't have to go past that. All right. Next thing about polygons is about how they look. Okay. So we could have convex or concave polygons. Okay. So concave means you have one or more vertices caved in. Okay. Or another way you could think of it is like pointing in. So an example of what that looked like would be similar to like this. So as you can tell, one or more vertices is like going into the shape versus going out. What? Oh. Okay, so that's concave. Okay, and convex means all vertices are outward. Okay, or pointing out. So you could have, this could be a convex shape. Most shapes that you encounter are convex. Concave is more the abnormal shape. Okay. Can anyone think of a concave shape that you've probably drawn tons of times? A star. Yeah. A star is the most common version of a concave shape. Nope, that star got a little crazy there. Let's try that again. There. Okay, as you can tell, some of them are in, some of them go inward, some go outward. And so that is a very famous concave shape. Don't judge my star. It's not that great. I mean, yeah, I was gonna do this, but technically I can't draw the inner lines. Okay. All right, so concave, convex, like I said, convex is much more common. Concave is more of a different scenario that comes up not as often. All right, now we're going to talk about some names of some famous polygons or the most common names that are used. And so the names are all based on the number of sides. Nope, actually, that's not one of the names. Okay. What do you think is the smallest form of a polygon? Three-sided figure. Triangle. Okay, any three-sided figure? Triangle. Okay. Now, 4 is normally the one where people start giving me lots of different answers. What is the most general name I could give a four-sided figure?
Square.
Nope, that's not general. That's actually very specific. A quadrilateral. Okay. Quadrilateral. So within quadrilateral, you could have square, rectangle, trapezoid, kite, isosceles trapezoid, rhombus. So there's lots of four-sided figures, but the most general form is a quadrilateral. Okay, what about five-sided? Think government. Pentagon. What about six-sided? Six is not as normal. Hexagon. Okay. 7. This one's normally not septagon. It's actually heptagon. So septagon is actually a name that I hear almost every single year, and I have no clue where it came from because I've literally never heard of septagon until I came to the school. So I don't know if it's a middle school thing that people are teaching septagon, but I don't know where that comes from. Okay, 8. Octagon. 9. Someone started to say something, I just didn't hear the rest. Here, okay, nonagon. Nonagon. 10. Yeah. Decagon. 11. This one's tricky because it actually doesn't have a name. It doesn't have a special name. So it's just 11 hyphen gong. It doesn't have a name. It's sad. But 12 is the last name. 12 is dodecagon. So 11, 13, 14, and on, they are just referred to as the number of sides hyphen gong. So 13 gong, 14 gong, 20 gong, 10,231 gong, forever and ever. So these are all the special names or the names that actually, or shapes that actually have names. The rest, like I said, would just be referred to as in gong. So if they have a special name, meaning all of these except for 11 would be represented by their name. Anything else, you would just use the number of sides, hyphen, and gong. Okay, give you a second to fill in that chart if you're still looking at it. Okay, any questions about the chart? I know it's more just getting the information, but can anyone not read something like that? Okay, so on your assignment, there'll be questions that say like, is it concave? Is it convex? What name is it? Okay, classify it by the number of sides. So if it was 3-sided, like this is a triangle and it's concave or it's convex. That makes sense? Okay. That's true. There are some shapes that concave doesn't really have an option. That's true. Yeah, it's very true. Like I said, concave is not very normal. Okay, now let's talk about, now that we talked about polygons, now let's talk about how we can use perimeter and area with them. Okay. How do we define area? What is area? What's inside, right? Area is what's inside. Okay, perimeter is what's outside. Okay. And while we're at it, do you guys know what the prefix of poly means? Multiple or many. So polygon just means a many-sided figure. So polygon is the general version. So polygon, that's where that comes from. So area of a polygon is what is enclosed or inside. Okay, whereas perimeter of a polygon is the length. Let me change that. The total length okay, the total of the lengths of its sides. So add all the sides up. So the total is your perimeter. All right, so we're just going to talk about the two basics of area and perimeter. We're not going to do every single polygon because they get kind of crazy. We're just going to do the basics. The first one is triangle. Anyone remember what the area of a triangle formula is or know what it is in general? Ever heard of it? It's okay if you don't. Some people may, some people don't. Maybe you'll know this one. So area is half the base times the height. Area is half the base times the height. Now, in order to find the height of a triangle, there must be something else that is true. So the height goes straight down. And then our base is down there at the bottom. So what's specific about your height is that the base and height must meet at a right angle. Or in other words, how much is a right angle? 90 degrees, good. And that's what that box means. So the height meets the base at a 90 degrees. Now, what would we do to find the perimeter?
Well, realistically, we can't really do that without values, but
Yes,
as before, you total this length, sides.
good. So we're gonna put values. So angle A is here, so side A is across from it. Angle C, so side C is across from it. So we just add up our three sides to find the values, okay? In geometry, much like algebra, a lot of things are gonna start off with variables, and then eventually you'll put values into them with numbers. You want to move to that spot?
I guess, yeah, I can take them.
What are you trying to read?
P.
P equals A plus B plus C.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So triangle, and then rather than finding the quadrilateral area and perimeter, it is based on what type of quadrilateral. So specifically, we're just going to talk about rectangle area and perimeter. Oh, let's see if I can spell it right. Okay. Because quadrilateral has so many different types, we're just specifically going to talk about rectangle. So the basic form of a rectangle looks like such. Square-ish, but not really, because a square has 4 equal sides.
But usually the image of a rectangle is a long square. is what I'm saying. So it isn't equal.
I know what you're trying to say, but they don't have the same properties. That's why I'm like, yes, I know what you're trying to say, but no, let's say that. We'll talk about specifics about quadrilaterals in another unit, but all right, so with a rectangle, okay, what is my area going to be? Yep,
It's like, it's not like
base times height or length times width. So it's however you want to think. You can think of it as base times height, or you can think of it as length times width. Right? Typically, length is going to be longer than width, but in general, it doesn't matter because you're just multiplying. Typically, we would refer to the length as the horizontal distance and the width as the vertical distance, but you're multiplying, so it doesn't matter in the end. Okay, and what about perimeter? We add up all the sides, okay? Typically, we refer to them as length and width, okay? So I would have a length and a width. What else would I have? I would also have another length and another width. Okay, so I could simplify that by saying 2 length plus 2 width. Okay, any questions about triangle, rectangle, area, perimeter before we get started with those questions? Any questions about the information before we do math with the information? All right. I haven't even done any math yet. All right, question number 1. So with the problems on your assignment, it is going to be referencing coordinate points. So let's refresh our memory about coordinate points. We talked about them on Monday. So coordinate points are what? What do coordinates have? Coordinate points. When you find like distance and midpoint, what is a coordinate point? Huh? X and Y, it's a coordinate point, X and Y, and it's meant on a grid typically. Okay, so for question number 1, you're gonna find the perimeter of the polygon with the vertices X as 1, 3. Y as -3, 3. Oh, I did this not alphabetical. W as 1, 0. And Z as -3, 0. So find the perimeter of the polygon with the vertices X as 1, 3, Y as -3, 3, W as 1, 0, and Z as -3, 0. Okay, now the easiest way to do this would be on grid paper. But not everyone has grid paper. So what I'm gonna do is pass out some grid paper for us to do these on. And I'll also pass out a ruler. All right, so on your grid paper, first we need to do is make some axes. We need to make an X and Y axes. Okay, which way does the X axis go? Horizontal, good. And the Y axis is vertical. Okay, I would suggest doing it on the side, not necessarily right in the middle, so you can use your space wisely. Okay. So I'm doing it here over on the left side, so I could potentially use the right side for a different problem. And then I'm gonna go through and number my axes. This should be a skill that you know how to do as far as numbering your axes. It's just like a number line. Okay, your graph should look like mine. There's little tick marks and numbers on each line. And then arrows at the end. Once you get to Algebra 2, this is what you would be expected on any graph that you make look like. So you kind of get a preview of what that would look like for next year. Once you have the basic setup of an X and Y axes and you have enough numbers, I went out to 5. Our numbers only go to 3 or -3, so I gave myself a little room. But obviously based on your numbers, that's how far you need to go out, okay? So always leave yourself a little room in case you don't give yourself enough space and you need to extend your axes a little bit, okay? They don't necessarily always have to be perfect, okay? We would consider this a 5 by 5. Typically in Algebra 2, we do 10 by 10s. Okay, but they don't necessarily have to be perfect, like up, left, right, and down, all the same direction, or all the same length. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and start plotting my points. So we have X as 1, 3. Okay, so what direction do I go first? Right, and then up 3. I'm gonna label it. Then we have Y at -3, 3. Therefore, I'm going to go left and up 3. Then we have W, which is at 1, 0. I don't have to go up or down, just left and right. And -3, 0. Once you have your 4 points, you can go ahead and connect your points, draw on the sides of your polygon. Based on the shape, we would consider this a rectangle. Good. So we're going to look at our rectangle information to figure out the area and perimeter. Now, when I use graph paper, I typically only use my graph paper for the actual graph, and then I just go back to my other paper for the actual work, so that I'm saving the graph paper for when I actually need graph. So if you want to write next to it, that's fine, but obviously you're losing space. So I would say going back to your line paper to do your math will be better in the end. So first thing we need to know in order to find the area and perimeter of our rectangle is the length and the width. Okay. Okay, on this problem, because it is nicely set up and everything is lined up, we can just simply count. Okay, so what would we consider our length? Our length would be 4. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So this length here, those are 4. What about my width? What's my width gonna be? So everyone should be able to look at their paper and count what their width is. With, as class confidently can say it's.
3.
We're not the only person. I was trying to get more people. Okay, 3. You were right. I was just trying. Once you have your length and width in this scenario, I'm just gonna kind of put this to the side. I can't show both at the same time. So to find my area, we're gonna take the length times the width. So 4 times 3, which results in 12. Okay. Does anyone know what happens when you square something in reference to the units? So if I said inches, centimeters, anything like that. So when you square, you're going to end up with units squared. Now, sometimes it might say inches, and it could say miles, it could say meters, but when it's on a coordinate grid, you just use units as a generic term. On your assignment, it will have a box and it'll just say the perimeter is box or blank units. So you won't actually have to type the units part. Okay, what about our perimeter? Okay, what equation could I say using the numbers? What would my perimeter be with numbers? Someone tell me that information. So looking at our equation, using our numbers, what would I say is that equation with numbers? Okay, you could 3 plus 3 and 4 plus 4, yes. How could I say it in reference to the way we wrote up here? That's one way. You could say 3 plus 3 and 4 plus 4. Yep.
4 times 2 plus 3.
Yeah. Because you're gonna have 2 of them, right? You have 2 lengths, you have 2 widths. So rather than saying 3 plus 3 and 4 plus 4, you can simplify it and saying 2 times 4 and 2 times 3. Okay, both are mathematically correct. Using the equation given, we would say 2 times 3 or 2 times 4. So 2 times 4 is as 8. And then 2 times 3 is 6. And 8 plus 6 is 14. And your answer would just be regular units. Okay. So when you are having perimeter, perimeter is just basic units. Area is units squared. And that will always be true for any shape. Now on your questions, almost every question is separated. So it might say area on one question, might say perimeter on another. I don't think there's any questions that ask for both, but you at least now can practice both on one of these, okay? We're gonna do another one. Obviously, I'm at the bottom of my page, but does anyone have any questions about the question we did together? No, so perimeter is just by itself. It's all by itself because you're just adding numbers together. Area is squared because you multiplied the numbers together. So that's a great note to write to yourself if you need to remember. Area is always squared. Perimeter is just regular units. And like I said, right now we're just working with a coordinate grid, but if it was in reference to like a parking lot, it might be using feet or miles, and you could say feet or feet squared or miles squared. Okay. But when there's no unit, we just say units. Any other questions about number 1? Before we try number 2? Okay, great. Let's try number 2. Oh, I guess I didn't let me correct my question. I only said find the perimeter and then we did find both. So I meant to say find the area and perimeter. I apologize. On your homework, there is only going to ask you once. I was just going to do both so we practice both and not have to do as many problems. So we just do both skills on one question. But on your homework, it'll just say find area, find perimeter, vice versa. Okay. Sorry, okay. Find the area and perimeter. Of the polygon. With the vertices. U -2, 4. V 3, 4. And W 2, -4. So based on our numbers are just going from 4 to -4 and -2 to 2 and -2 to 3. So another 5 by 5 will be just perfect for the second one. Okay, and what I'd like you to do on number 2 is I'd like you to plot those 3 points. Without me giving you any reminders, plot those 3 points. Okay, so hopefully I had enough time to draw that one. Let me draw it here if you weren't sure. So -2, 4 is U. 3, 4 was V. And 2, -4 was W. So with the amount of points you were given, probably should have been clear what shape you were doing, but with the image, hopefully we can all see that we have a triangle. We all have that shape. Okay. All right, so in order to find the area and perimeter of a triangle, we gotta do a little bit more work because we also need to know not only the side lengths, but we also need to know what the base and height is. Now, the base could be the same as the side length. No, and normally it is, okay, but the height is not always the length of a side. Okay, remember the height and base have to be meeting at a 90-degree angle. So of my sides, which one do we think should be the base? Which one makes the most sense as the base? What do you think? WV, no, what were you gonna say?
Oh,
Top one, yeah. So if we kind of flip this around and look at it, okay, this is gonna make more sense as the base because it'll be easier to find a perpendicular height. If we use, you said WV, it's gonna be a little bit harder to find a perpendicular height to that one because of how it's slanted, okay? So if we find a 90-degree height to this, I'm gonna be able to draw a straight line. And this ends up being my height. Okay, what does that height end up being? What's the value? 8, good, the height is 8. Yellow is a little hard to see. Let me change it to green. Okay, what about my base? Now my base is gonna be nice because it's straight across. My base is gonna be 5, good. Therefore, my area, remember that triangle formula is half the base times the height. So we have half times 5 times 8. Okay. Now, when you're finding the area, I always suggest to students, multiply the base times the height, then take half of that. 9 times out of 10, that's gonna be an easier calculation than trying to find half of the first number, then multiplying. So 5 times 8 is 40, half of that is, so 5 times 8 is 40, half of that is 20. And what would we say is our label on that? 20 what? Units squared. Okay. Okay, so now that we're trying to find the perimeter, we need to find the lengths of all the sides, okay? So we already have 5 being this top one. Am I gonna be able to easily count the other ones? No, because they don't line up, I won't be able to count them. So what skill that we've learned in the last couple of weeks would we be able to use to find the length between those 2 points? Think the last lesson we had, the homework that was due today. Starts with a D. The distance formula. We're gonna have to use the distance formula. So because these don't perfectly line up, and on your homework, there'll be examples where they don't perfectly line up. Obviously, these did. We're gonna have to use the distance formula, okay? Who can remember what the distance formula is? Anyone off memory, remember it? Yeah. So it's actually opposite and you gotta square and add them, but you at least had some of it, so I appreciate that. Okay, so distance formula is the difference in your x coordinate squared plus the difference in your y coordinate squared. So let's start with, doesn't matter, let's start with UW. So we're gonna start with the left side. Okay, and I'm gonna write down the points to help us down here. So U is -2, 4, and W was 2, -4. Okay, so there's a little bit of a practice from the skill we learned on Monday. So which one is going to be considered my X2? Which one's the second X? Yep. 2, good. Remember, you don't have to label them, but if that helps you, then you should do it, okay? So we have X2, which is 2, minus a -2, plus, what's the second value is going to be? What's the second expression going to say with Y2 minus Y1? What's the expression going to be? What minus what? -4 minus 4. So remember, the formula is always minus. The only time it turn plus is if you're subtracting a negative. Okay. All right, so remember, a double negative means that it turns into a positive. And then we have 2 plus 2. Oops. So 4 squared plus, what's -4 minus 4? -8. Okay, 4 squared is 16. What about -8 squared? -64. It doesn't matter that it's negative when you square it. In the end, if the negative is included in the parentheses, no, because a negative times a negative is always positive. So -8 times a -8 is still 64. Okay, and what's 16 plus 64? 80. Now on your assignment, there are a couple questions that say leave it as the exact answer. So it would be a fraction or a whole number. But in this case, because this square root of 80 doesn't simplify, right? It's not a perfect number. We would need to approximate it. So you use your calculator, or there's lots of programs you can use at home. Square root of 80 to the 100th, what would that be? How many decimals is the 100th? 8.94. If I said tenths, it would be to the first digit, and if it's hundredths, it's to the second digit. Okay, I would like you guys to try the other side, to find the other side, which is VW. You're gonna do the same skill. You're just using 1 point different. I'd like you to find the distance of the side length of VW. Please use the information above as your guide to help you if you're not sure. You can go ahead and go. It's, I don't know why they're loading today. Seems like it's moving slowly. Right, go ahead and check with someone near you or work with someone near you to try and figure that out. That does require you to say something to someone. Yes. For the time being, until we are able to get a class set of calculators, we're trying to get those ordered. If you don't have a calculator, you may use your cell phone calculator to find the approximation, okay? You're also, if you have your computer up, you can just search like a calculator. There's lots of calculator apps. If you need to use like your desktop, but if you need to use that for this part, you may, okay? But I'd like you to square your own numbers, if possible, if you remember those. All right, anyone wants to make a guess? Without like the decimal, just what should you get in the end? Square root of what? It should be 65. Good. So let me show you how that would have worked. Should have gotten 65. Sorry, I was trying to end his pass, but my e-haul pass has been working, being a little weird today. All right. So first you would have 2 minus 3 quantity squared plus -4 minus 4 quantity squared. As you can, okay. So then we would have 2 minus 3, which is -1. And -4 minus 4, which is -8. -1 squared is 1. -8 squared is 64. So you should have gotten square root of 65, which approximately is what? 8.06. Good. Okay, so now we've found the base was 5. UW was approximately 8.94, and VW was approximately 8.06. So how are we gonna find the perimeter? How do we find the perimeter?
Yeah.
You add all three together, yep. We have 5 plus 8.94 plus 8.06, which results in a value of 22, and their label would be units. Thank you. Who shared that one? Who said 22? Awesome. It's hard for me to tell who's saying it sometimes if it's so quiet. All right, so that one's a little bit more difficult, but it does incorporate a skill we've already learned. So it's a good review for those that may have struggled with that before, but it's a good review. Okay, any other questions or concerns about number 2? Okay. So that is going to be it for your notes. And then you will have your big ideas assignment and class time to work on that.